Okay, here we are at the very end of our book, chapter 17. All this long time. Well, the war was ended. Uncle Henrik had said that, and it was true. The war ended almost 2 long years later. Anne-Marie was 12. Church bells rang all over Copenhagen early that May evening. The Danish flag was raised everywhere. People stood in the streets and wept as they sang the national anthem at Denmark. Anne-Marie stood on the balcony of the apartment with her sister and her parents, and they watched. Up and down the streets, across to the other side, they could see flags and banners in almost every window. She knew that many of those apartments were empty. For nearly 2 years now, neighbors had tended the plants, they dusted the furniture, and polished the candlesticks for the Jews who had fled. Her mother had done so for the Rosens. It is what friends do, Mamma had said. And now, neighbors had scattered into every single unoccupied waiting apartment, opened a window, and hung a symbol of freedom there. That evening, Mrs. Johansson's face was wet with tears. Kirsty, waving a small flag, sang, her blue eyes so bright. Even Kirsty was growing up. She no longer was a light-hearted chatterbox of a child, and now she was taller, more serious, and very thin. She looked like the pictures of Lise at 7 in the old album. Peter Nielsen, he died. It was a painful fact to recall on this day when there was just so much joy in Denmark, but Anne-Marie forced herself to think of her red-headed almost brother and how devastating the day was when they received the news that Peter had been captured and executed by the Germans in the public square at Ravingen in Copenhagen. He had written a letter to them from prison the night before he was shot. It had said simply that he loved them, that he was not afraid, and that he would request that he would be buried next to his loved Lise. He did not regret what he did for his country, nor for the sake of all free people. But even that was not to be for Peter. The Nazis refused to return the bodies of the young men that they shot. They simply buried them there where they were killed and marked the graves only with numbers. Later, Anne-Marie had gone to the place with her parents, and they had laid flowers there on the bleak, numbered ground. And that night, Anne-Marie's parents told her the truth about Lisa's death at the beginning of the war. She was part of the resistance too, Papa had exclaimed. Part of the group that fought for our country in whatever way they could. We didn't know, Mama added. She didn't tell us. Peter told us the night that she had died. Oh, Papa, Anne-Marie cried. Mama, they didn't shoot Lise, did they? The way they did Peter in the public square with people watching? She wanted to know. She wanted to know it all, but wasn't certain that she could actually bear the knowledge. But Papa shook his head. She was with Peter and others in a cellar where they held secret meetings to make plans. And somehow the Nazis found out, and they raided the place that evening. They all ran in different directions, trying to escape. Some of them were shot, Mama told her sadly. Peter was shot in the arm. Do you remember that Peter's arm was bandaged and in a sling? At Lisa's funeral, he wore a coat over it so that no one would notice, and a hat to hide his red hair. The Nazis were looking for him. Anne-Marie didn't remember. She really hadn't noticed. The whole day she had been, it's just a blur of grief. But what about Lise? If they didn't shoot her, what happened? From the military car, they saw her running, and they simply ran her down. So it was true what you said, that she was hit by a car. It was true, Papa told her. They were all so young, Mama said, shaking her head. She blinked, closed her eyes for a moment, and took a deep, deep breath. so very, very young, with so much hope. And now, remembering Lise, Anne-Marie looked from the balcony down into the street. She saw that below, amid the music and singing and the sound of the church bells, people were dancing. It brought back another memory, the memory of Lise so long ago, wearing that yellow dress, dancing with Peter on the night that they announced their engagement. She turned and she went to her bedroom, where this blue trunk stood in the corner, and, as it had all these years, opening it, Anne-Marie saw that the yellow dress had begun to fade a little discolored at the edges where it had lain for so long in folds. And carefully she spread open the skirt of the dress and found the place where Ellen's necklace lay hidden in the pocket. The little star of David still gleamed gold. "Papa?" she said, returning to the balcony. Her father was standing with the others, watching the rejoicing crowds. She opened her hand and she showed him the necklace. "Can you fix this? I have kept it all this time. It was Ellen's." Her father took it from her, examined the broken clasp. "Yes," he said, "I can fix it. When the Rosens come home, you can give it back to Ellen. Until then," Anne-Marie told him, "I will wear it myself."